Karen Whitmore thought she ruled Maple Crest Lane, until the day Thomas Granger, the quiet homeowner she buried in $50,000 of HOA violations, built a toll booth on the very road she drove daily, a road he secretly owned. When I bought my house on Maple Crest Lane, I thought I'd found a little slice of paradise. Quiet neighborhood, good schools nearby, and enough trees lining the street to make autumn look like a postcard. The house itself was a fixer-upper, but that was fine. I enjoyed working with my hands, and I had plans, big ones. What the realtor casually mentioned during closing, almost like an afterthought, turned out to be the detail that would change everything. I technically owned the stretch of private road that ran in front of my property. It was part of an old land deed apparently overlooked when the subdivision was developed. Didn't mean much at the time. I had no intention of doing anything with it. That was before Karen. Karen moved into the house across the street a year after me. At first, she seemed harmless enough, always waving, bringing out cookies during HOA socials, even organizing a few community cleanups. But once she got elected HOA president, her whole vibe changed. She was no longer neighborly Karen. She became HOA Supreme Commander Karen, clipboards, sunglasses, and that sharp little smirk. Suddenly, everyone's front yard became her business, and mine, apparently her favorite target. The first violation came on a sticky summer day. I remember it clearly because I had just mowed the lawn the day before. The letter was taped to my door like some kind of eviction notice. Violation Nafaranja 14. Grass exceeds HOA height limits. Fine, $500. I actually laughed, thought it was a joke. Then more letters started arriving. Violation number 22. Trash cans visible for more than 18 minutes after pickup. $250 violation. Number 41. Unapproved window curtains. $300 violation. Number 7. Driveway has visible oil stains. $400. It didn't stop. Every week brought a new fine. They were digging through ancient bylaws and using a magnifying glass to find any excuse. I tried to contest it. Went to an HOA meeting thinking I could talk it out, maybe clear the air. Big mistake. Karen ran the meeting like a courtroom, and her board, most of whom were her friends, rubber-stamped every decision she made. I brought up the ridiculous charges. She smiled and said, "Rules are rules. Maybe you should move to a community that doesn't have standards." The room laughed. I didn't. I started keeping track of every fine, logging each one in a spreadsheet. After 3 months, the grand total was over $50,000. 50 grand. For things like a misplaced flower pot, the angle of my solar panels, and apparently the shade of my front door not being neighborhood-approved forest green. I had a lawyer send a cease and desist letter. Karen responded by fining me for having an unauthorized legal notice displayed on my front porch. That's when I remembered the road, the private road, the one every single person in the HOA, including Karen, used daily to get in and out of the neighborhood. If they wanted to play hardball, fine. I had just the plan. And it started with a toll booth. I spent the next week quietly setting everything in motion. No warnings, no announcements, just a phone call to my old friend Jake, who ran a small construction company and owed me a favor. We met up over coffee, and when I explained what I wanted, a full-scale toll booth complete with a retractable barrier, a ticketing system, and security cameras, he paused only for a second before saying, "You're serious?" "Dead serious," I told him. Construction started just after 11 p.m. on a Friday. By dawn, a sleek metal structure stood at the entrance to Maple Crest Lane. We painted it a respectable gray, added a digital display screen, and mounted security cameras at every angle. The booth had a keypad for residents to enter prepaid codes if they chose, but anyone without a code? They'd have to pay $3 for access. The next morning, Karen rolled up in her Range Rover right on schedule, sipping some overpriced green drink, and probably planning her next violation notice. She slammed on the brakes when she saw the toll booth. The barrier was down. She honked once, then again, longer and angrier. I stepped out of my garage, coffee in hand, wearing my favorite Rules. Our Rules hoodie. Good morning, I called cheerfully. Welcome to Maple Crest Lane Toll Services. That'll be $3 to pass through. Her mouth dropped open. You can't be serious. I am. And before you call the police, yes, I checked. It's completely legal. Private property. I even had it surveyed. This strip of road, mine. Always has been. She got out of her car like she was about to storm a castle. This is illegal harassment. You can't just charge people to use a road. I pulled out a copy of the land deed. Actually, I can, and I am. She snatched the paper, skimmed it, then tossed it back at me. You'll regret this. I already regret not doing it sooner, I said, pressing the button to raise the barrier and let her through. Just this once. Word spread fast. By that afternoon, the HOA had called an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, of course, but I didn't need to be. I had a feeling Karen's rage was loud enough to hear 3 streets away. Residents started showing up at the booth, confused, some amused, others annoyed. Most paid the fee and shook their heads, but a few demanded answers. I kept it simple. I've been fined $50,000 for nonsense. This is my response. Fair's fair. One guy laughed and said, Honestly, you're a legend. The HOA tried to challenge it legally. They brought in a lawyer who looked like he charged by the minute. He swaggered in with Karen and a couple of board members, waving a stack of papers like it meant something. I smiled, handed him a flash drive, and said, You'll want to read the zoning and property access laws before we waste each other's time. 2 days later, the lawyer backed off. Karen, though? She wasn't done, not even close. At first, the neighborhood adjusted to the toll booth like it was just another weird HOA rule. Except this time, it didn't come from Karen. Some folks grumbled, but most just paid the $3 and got on with their lives. A few even stopped by to chat while waiting at the gate, asking if I could offer monthly passes or discounts for senior citizens. I did both. Unlike the HOA, I believed in fairness. Karen, on the other hand, was unraveling. She couldn't stand the fact that she had to slow down and wait at a booth on a road she believed she controlled. She made a big show of flashing her HOA ID card, like I was supposed to be intimidated by it. One time, she even threw it at the booth and shouted, I run this community. I calmly pressed the intercom and said, Nope, you run the HOA. I own the road. Different departments, Karen. It was delicious. But her petty little mind wasn't done scheming. One night around 2 a.m., my motion-triggered cameras picked up some movement at the far end of the property. I checked the feed and nearly choked on my midnight snack. Karen, along with 2 HOA board members, was in the woods behind the neighborhood, dressed in black, digging with shovels like they were burying treasure. Only they weren't burying anything. They were carving out a path, a shortcut. The next day, sure enough, I noticed a narrow dirt trail winding through the trees, connecting the end of Maple Crest Lane to a small road behind the development. A sneaky backdoor exit. They must have figured if they couldn't go through the toll, they'd go around it. I let them finish. Let them waste the time, energy, and HOA funds laying gravel, cutting brush, and pretending they were clever. A few days later, they unveiled their Community Green Trail, a ridiculous name for what was clearly a toll avoidance path. They sent out a smugly worded HOA email announcing the expansion of walking and vehicle access options for residents. It was so obvious it was laughable. What Karen didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the forested lot they built that trail on had been quietly purchased 6 months ago. By me. Well, not by me directly. I'd set up a shell company, Crescent Pines Holdings, and acquired the wooded parcel through it when I first heard rumblings of HOA expansion plans. I knew Karen had ambition bigger than her intelligence, and I wanted to be prepared, so I did what any responsible landowner would do. I had my lawyer file a cease and desist for trespassing, misuse of private property, and unpermitted construction. I sent it directly to Karen's house, certified. Mail, of course. The reaction was instant. The HOA board panicked. The funds used to build that trail had come from the emergency budget, money meant for streetlight maintenance and winter plowing. Now they were facing lawsuits and had to dip into reserve accounts just to cover initial legal fees. The residents, once too scared to speak up, were starting to see Karen for who she really was, and she was about to lose everything. The fallout from the lawsuit was like watching a slow-motion car crash. The HOA's emergency fund, which was supposed to cover things like broken pipes and snow removal, was bleeding money just to keep Karen's ego afloat. Word of the lawsuit spread like wildfire, and it wasn't long before angry neighbors began showing up at her door. I heard yelling more than once, people demanding to know why the HOA was being sued for building an illegal trail and why their dues were going to legal fees instead of fixing the growing list of neighborhood problems. Trash pickups were missed. Landscaping crews stopped showing up. One street's power was out for nearly 12 hours after a blown transformer didn't get addressed. The neighborhood, once obsessively curated under Karen's iron rule, was starting to fall apart. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Karen doubled down. She released a community newsletter titled Defending Our Future, where she painted me as a rogue landowner trying to hold the neighborhood hostage. She even accused me of surveillance abuse because of the security cameras at the toll booth, conveniently ignoring the fact that they were legal, properly posted, and only pointed at my own property. But fear works best when people don't ask questions, and Karen was betting everything on that. Except people were asking questions. Now, the final nail in her coffin came during the emergency HOA board meeting 2 weeks later. The crowd overflowed into the parking lot. One by one, residents got up and aired their grievances. Unexplained fines, ignored repair requests, and the misuse of HOA funds for that ridiculous green trail that had now been shut down and blocked off with a chain and giant private property sign. Karen tried to shift the blame. She claimed the trail was approved, that she'd been advised it was public land, that she was doing it all to provide more options for residents. But her voice was shaky, her tone defensive, and when I stepped up to speak, holding a large poster of the land deed showing my company owned the trail, along with video stills of her midnight digging operation, the crowd turned. Completely. A vote was called right then and there. Bylaws were quoted, motions were made, and within 15 minutes Karen was removed as HOA president. Just like that. But she didn't go quietly. The very next day, I had 3 different county inspectors at my door. Back-to-back visits. First, a code compliance officer checking the reflective glare from my solar panels. Then a building inspector questioning the height of my fence. Finally, Someone from Environmental Services claiming I was illegally diverting rainwater runoff. It didn't take a genius to figure out who sent them. Karen had a cousin in the county's permit office, and she was pulling every string she had left. The goal was obvious: bury me in red tape, exhaust me, frustrate me until I gave up. But she didn't know I was 10 steps ahead. I'd spent the last few months preparing for this. Zoning laws, building permits, legal consultations. Everything was in order. Every form filed, every box checked. Karen wanted war. She just declared it on the wrong person. I wasn't about to let Karen's final tantrum go unanswered. While she tried to play puppet master with the county, I was already pulling the rug out from under her entire empire. For weeks, I'd been working with a real estate attorney and a land use expert, digging through the HOA's records, their filings, and, most importantly, their charter. What we found changed everything. The HOA's founding documents had a renewal clause. Every 10 years, the HOA was required to reaffirm its charter with the county clerk's office, or it would dissolve automatically. The kicker? That renewal had been due 7 years ago, and no one ever filed it. Not Karen, not the board, not any of the presidents before her. It was a formality everyone forgot, and it cost them everything. Legally speaking, the HOA had ceased to exist 7 years prior. Every violation notice, every fine, every lien they had threatened or filed, all of it was invalid. Karen had been running a ghost ship, enforcing non-existent rules with a fake crown on her head. I didn't announce it right away. I waited for the perfect moment. At the next HOA meeting, technically now just a social gathering, I stood before the crowd with a full slideshow presentation complete with highlighted documents and timestamps. I showed the lapse in the charter, the county's verification, and the legal opinion from my attorney confirming that not only was the HOA defunct, but anyone who had paid fines in the last 7 years could file for reimbursement. The room went dead silent. Karen wasn't even in attendance, probably too ashamed or too afraid to face the people she'd ruled like a petty tyrant. But her name was on everyone's lips. People looked stunned, then confused, then angry. One woman stood up and shouted, "So I paid $1,200 for a mailbox violation, and it meant nothing?" Exactly. Within a week, Karen's world completely collapsed. A dozen neighbors filed small claims lawsuits against her and the former board members. The county launched an investigation into her cousin's convenient inspections. Her Range Rover disappeared from the driveway, and so did she. Word was she moved in with her sister 2 towns over, licking her wounds and plotting her next HOA takeover somewhere far away. But I wasn't done yet. With the HOA gone, I proposed a new idea, a voluntary neighborhood co-op. No fines, no petty rules, no forced dues. We'd contribute what we could, vote on major decisions, and keep things transparent. The toll booth stayed, but residents got free passes, and the $3 from visitors and delivery trucks now went into a community fund. We used it to repave sidewalks, fix the playground, and host our first-ever block party. People came out in droves. Laughed, danced, ate barbecue, and joked about Karen's Toll Road like it was some urban legend. The neighborhood was finally free, happier, friendlier, and way more fun. And as for me, I still sip my morning coffee and watch the booth every day. Outsiders pay the toll. Locals wave and smile. The road I once ignored had become the foundation of a small victory over tyranny. And if Karen ever thinks about coming back, let's just say I've got blueprints for a second booth.